I'm Jess, and if you're wondering why I have any opinions on this whatsoever, I've contributed to a few of these very small projects. And yeah, I've seen the various contribution processes, like the kernel uses email, a lot of these others use GitHub, Go uses Gerrit, and a mix of GitHub for issues. So it's kind of like this whole different world of how people manage their projects. And I'm going to be going over kind of the processes that I've seen and implemented at various places and how you can kind of learn from these experiences. Some of them are not always, of course, the best thing, but if you learn from other people's mistakes, then you can do your open source project possibly better. So yeah, all the opinions here are my own and probably a lot of maintainers out there who are frustrated. So yeah, I'll speak on behalf of them as well. So the outline for the talk today is going to be getting and retaining contributors, scaling maintainers, dealing with vulnerabilities, and handling company versus project conflicts, which gets very interesting. So we're going to start with getting and retaining contributors. So one of the first things, if you want to have people come to your project and know kind of where to start, would be creating help wanted labels. And this is easier said than done, because if you start creating help wanted labels, you need to kind of know that the issue that it's on. It might be a documentation change, or maybe it's a bug fix. And sometimes the bug fixes kind of become, of course, a rabbit hole. And then it's not a beginner issue. It becomes a very expert issue because you just got 18 levels deep and nobody knows what's happening, except for the one person who, if they get hit by a bus, the project is doomed. So it becomes kind of complex in creating these issues and labeling them correctly. So it is a big task and should actually count as contributing as well. But you need to be familiar with the project, basically, to do it. And you also need to be aware of any internal decision-making dynamics. So, the project had to start somewhere, and maybe the communications were not always open to begin with. Maybe the project was started by a company, and then it became and evolved into a more community-driven project. So you need to be aware of the things that you are talking about in private that should really be a community discussion, because if you keep those things to yourself, then other people are not going to feel involved, and it doesn't feel as open as the project should feel. Defining contributions outside of code, like I said, labeling issues. Documentation is huge. Literally, no one will want to use your project or even know how to use your project if you do not document how to do it. Nothing is more frustrating than being hey, this thing looks super cool, trying to use it, but nothing worked. And now I'm tired because I just wasted 5 hours of my life. Documentation is a huge contribution. Community contributions are huge too, things that make sure that the community is healthy, that it's safe for everyone. Everything that goes into a project, all these invisible things people do, are actually so key to making sure that it's great. And these should be recognized as well. So you want to have positive reinforcement for people when they do good things, and make sure that they become repeat contributors, because getting someone to contribute once is one thing, but if it's the worst experience of their life, they're never going to contribute again. You want to keep them around and then kind of build up their skill levels so that maybe they'll become a maintainer, or maybe they'll find more items to work on because they are now so knowledgeable in this one piece of your code base that they could be an expert in it. So really helping people build themselves in your project is great for getting a perfect community. Well, not perfect is extreme, but nothing's perfect, but a good, healthy community. So you also need to be respectful of contributors' time, because at a lot of these places, sure, you can get paid to work on open source, but that is very rare. And a lot of people who contribute to open source are using their own personal time. For them, this is a passion project. And I think for everyone that contributes to open source projects, it's passion, because why would you even participate in a community that you didn't like, or on a project that you don't actually feel is going to help someone, maybe yourself, maybe your company, or maybe someone else, but you actually have a like key bind into this project. So as long as you are not like putting too much on contributors and being respectful, if they don't get back to you right away or if they need time to work on something, just be aware of that. And then clearly define the processes for like kind of going up the ladder of a project. So if you started a contributor and then like, this person is like, I really just want to be a maintainer with those other people, it looks really cool. Like define what they need to do, because otherwise it's going to be some sort of hidden process, like those internal discussions that you have. And they're not going to know exactly like the steps they need to take, almost like a career ladder in a company. Like you need to actually define what people need to do and base it off real data. At Docker, we based becoming a maintainer off of the data of contributions and not just code contributions. So if you're labeling issues, if you're active on the repo, you can become a maintainer as well, as long as your like stats in the way that we measured it were up to a certain level, which is all defined in the project, so you know what you have to reach. And of course, any of this can be changed with a pull request, which is cool too. So it starts a discussion on like if the process is bad, what you should do as well. So scaling maintainers is like a huge problem for projects, just because burnout, I've burned out before, I know other maintainers that have burned out before, and it happens so commonly because you don't even realize it's happening until you're like, whoa. So yeah, you need explicit guidelines for acceptable patches and release cutoffs. This is my favorite GIF for like opinions on things. So yeah, if you don't set up the guidelines, people are not going to know like when they have to meet certain deadlines. And even if you do set release cutoffs, you're going to get those like last minute people being like, hey, merge my patch the day before release, and you're just like, are you kidding me right now? But you can point them to documentation and be like, this is the process, no thank you, unless it's a bug fix or something, obviously. So if you set up the guidelines, then you have places to point people so they're not like super angry when you're like, no, but wait 3 months for the next release or whatever your release cycle is. And of course, this isn't perfect because I've seen on like Kubernetes recently, and other projects before that, people do wait for the last minute for their patches to get in, and then they are like, if it doesn't get in this release, I am literally going to have to wait 2 months, and that sucks. So then it's very like pressure heavy on the maintainers. So there isn't exactly like a key fix for all of this because people procrastinate or they're just not done in time, and like 2-month release cycles, you gotta fit a lot in there. But setting explicit guidelines will at least give you an out for rejecting patches. And then this one is so important that I put twice. Like you really need to define how people grow themselves inside your community, because you want to get more maintainers. You literally want so many more maintainers so that your work as a maintainer is not as heavy as it used to be. And this takes like a lot of like self-control, obviously. Like I'm a control freak, so giving over control is very hard for me, especially trusting other people with that control. But once you like see contributors kind of grow themselves and then become like what you built into them, because they'll learn like they'll learn what you want based off like how you define your scope of the project and what features you want. And then they kind of go with that. Like I just, on my own personal GitHub, I have a Docker files repo that is like actually super popular for some reason. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I actually added a maintainer to that because I don't have enough time to go through all the like pull requests people give me, but he does literally exactly what I would do, and it's like this great thing where I'm just like, you actually responded how I would respond, and like I almost want to cry because it's so great right now. So really, like getting more maintainers is just, it feels great once you give up some control, even though it's really hard. And then you want to like encourage people to take on more responsibility, which is hard, and it is part of this giving up control, but once you do it, it will feel really good, as long as you don't mess it up and give it to the wrong person. But yeah, you'll see, since of course like people are very lack of trust in the beginning, that you'll like it a lot more than you think you will. And you want to distribute control amongst the project. So any item with like a lower factor of like, if there is something changed here, is it going to break the world and everyone will be upset? If that like factor is super low, then like give more control to other people, because if it breaks, it doesn't matter right away. It's not gonna be some like huge tire fire. So start distributing control there. Maybe it's like your website, maybe it's like documentation, anything that can be fixed like in a couple of days without everyone crying would be great for that. And then it also gives people like a sense of belonging, you know, when you give up control and you give them areas to contribute that are kind of theirs. So definitely distribute control. And then also, this is off your hands. Like, you don't have to worry about it when you give it to someone else. And they're probably going to be so happy that you gave it to them that they're going to be like, I'm not going to fuck this up. So yeah. Then I'm just going to like touch very briefly on governance. This is something that like I've never seen it done well, to be honest. It's hard to do. Like, I will not debate the fact that it is hard. So, but I think one of the key things about governance is that you need the ability to change those in power needs to lie without the people in power. Because the problem is, once these like power structures get in place, those with power don't want to change it. So why would they ever have any incentive? They have the power. So you need to almost give some control in extenuating circumstances maybe, or you know, set up clearly defined rules, but give power to other people to kind of distribute power if it gets out of hand. But that's pretty much all I'm going to say about that, because I've really never seen it done well. So dealing with vulnerabilities is another one. Once your project gets used, like, there will be vulnerabilities found. This is not something to be embarrassed by. All code has bugs. Like, sure, some of them are bad, but like, if your project is actually being used, they will be found. Like, the Linux kernel has bugs. OpenSSL, that's just a tire fire. So the key is how you deal with these bugs, and that you handle them accordingly on behalf of everyone involved, and that you do it fast, you do it well. So I'll go over kind of some items around this area. So you need to like define your process, obviously, just like everything else I said before. Everything needs to be defined in the repo so that like if, you know, say newbie comes to the project and they don't know how anything is going to work, and then, you know, other person gets hit by a bus, they can do the thing that they need to do. So if it's clearly defined, then everyone kind of knows what's expected to happen as well. And they can be like, hey, you said 7 days, and it's been 7 days and I have no response, or something like that. You also want to make it public so that people know. If you just define it as private, that's super stupid. So you want to be able to handle everyone's needs, which is hard. Like any open source project, you're trying to make everyone happy, and it is literally impossible. So users want software without bugs, duh. They want to be able to upgrade without breaking their entire world, because if it's a security fix, you're going to want to throw that right into prod, you know? Of course, like, hopefully into staging first if you have that set up, but like, people do bad things. So they want to be able to upgrade and know that things will not break on their end. And they want to know when to upgrade. Like, if there is a security fix, like, and you don't tell anyone, like, did it really happen? So like, you have to have like some sort of set process for informing people, whether it's a mailing list or Twitter or like Carrier Pigeon. Make it consistent every time so that people know when they get it from one place, it will always be that one place. And then researchers and like bug reporters, they want to know updates on what's happening. Like, every single security researcher that I talked to was like, yeah, all we want to know is what's happening, and people don't tell us that. And that's kind of sad, to be honest. So that's kind of why they'll disclose early or stuff like that. They just want like an ack that, you know, you heard it, you're going to fix it, and you're doing things. And then like, kind of like, we have a patch, and then in 2 days we're going to release. It's like, just tell them what's happening. It's not that hard. And then the project wants to continue to instill trust, which is a huge one. Like OpenSSL, for instance. it's not exactly the most trustworthy thing anymore. I mean, it's just kind of gotten a reputation. So you need to be able to handle these things well enough that people are still like, I trust them to do the right thing if something happens, and I trust them to have the right priorities for the project. So there's like a few other things that go into this, and Brandon Phillips and I gave an entire talk at KubeCon on it if you want to watch it later, but like one of the things we learned was that you shouldn't compromise on disclosure dates. Researchers are gonna come to you and be like, so I'm giving this talk at Black Hat, but it's in like 2 months. So can we wait? Or they'll be like, or it's tomorrow, and I wanna disclose it to everyone, but there isn't a fix available yet, so good luck. Yeah, you need to kind of be like, no. And this is a huge thing with having the process defined so that you can be like, hey, look at this thing that exists. Do not do that. And then you want to also define like the maximum time frame. So something like Project Zero has, their 90 days. If you don't fix their bug, they're going to publicly disclose it, which is fine. And when we define the process for Kubernetes, we chose, I think, like 21 or something, which is obviously under that. But you want to define the maximum time frame so that these researchers know and that they won't like break embargo beforehand, which is another problem, like not just with researchers, but with the parties involved, because you'll probably have some sort of vendor list that you're letting know ahead of time, and you want to make sure they don't break embargo ever. So it's a lot of herding sheep. Open source is basically herding sheep. And then you want to make sure the process accounts for when things go wrong, when people break embargo. So yes, this is a shameless plug to our talk, which goes way more in depth to that than I just did. So this is kind of like a more personal point of the talk. So a lot of projects are actually like, spawned from a company, and then they become this open source project that multiple people outside the company contribute to. And this is kind of going to go over how to handle the issues that will arise from that, because you do have a lot of those like internal processes that you need to handle and manage if you're going to have like a truly open source project. So yeah, when I first started at Docker, before that I was contributing to the project, but I was giving like a lot of talks and stuff on Docker. And it was like before, I started using Docker before it was even like 1.0. Super cool. Would not recommend. In production for a startup, so super cool. Yeah, so like my priorities landed, of course, with the open source project because that's what I loved first. I didn't necessarily care about the company. So, but they were paying me, so there is like a conflict of interest there, and it's kind of like, when should you say something, when should you not? So I'll go over more of those details in a bit, but there are a few ways to like kind of grow your community and also your like organization that's working on the project. You want to hire from the community, but you obviously can't hire everyone because then everyone will work for the company. And this is kind of like a balance that you should keep. But at Docker, we did try to hire from the community. When I joined Kubernetes, I was definitely from the community. And it's nice because then you actually know that they have the project's best interest at heart. And as long as the company is okay with you having the project's best interest at heart, then that's great. And you'll always make sure that the community is involved and stuff like that. And maintainership must be earned. Like, just because you join a company, you should not get access to the repo. That just seems super bad. And like, things could totally get messed up if someone accidentally force pushed and they were on a different team than the one actually contributing. And even if you joined the company before contributing to the repository, you need to play by the same rules as literally everyone else. Those rules that you defined for becoming a maintainer from a contributor, those apply to everyone, not just who you're paid by. And maintainership also, if you leave a company, that should stay with you because it's obviously based on an individual and their contributions and not who they worked for, because it was earned. And you need to allow for saying no. So this is kind of one of the main conflicts that will arise because the company will have their kind of roadmap for making money, which is important for your paycheck, right? And then you'll kind of have your priorities in terms of the community wants these things though. And like maybe they won't make us money right away, but like if we don't do them, they're gonna be like, what the hell are you doing? So there is like a compromise involved there, but you also need to be aware and allow people to say no, which this came up like a few times when I worked at Docker, but one of them was like right after I joined, and it was like one of the scariest things in my life. Mostly because I was like, am I going to get fired if I say no? But then it ended up being fine. So I'm also like very blunt. So I think people just realized that that was going to happen. And then also looks good to me lasts forever. So like when you looks good to me a patch, it's not the company, you know, saying looks good to me. That is tied to you. So like if your company is saying like merge this patch and it's super shitty, like I would never do that just because like that reflects badly on me. It doesn't even reflect on the company in terms of the fact that maybe they sent the patch, and maybe that looks bad on them because it is shit. But like, if it looks good to me, that is actually going to be my reputation on the line. And once you say yes to a patch, you literally can't back it out. Like, so many features that go in, you cannot take out because, you know, people rely on those. People rely on features that you didn't even know existed. They use things, and you're just like, that is not a feature, but crap, we just broke it. And now we have to put that thing back, and the other thing isn't gonna work now. So you kind of need to be aware of these things and keep the trust of the community, because when you start breaking things like that, then the community kind of slowly starts to like lose trust in you. So making sure that like backwards compatible changes are not there. So yeah, definitely be aware that every single feature that goes in with looks good to me is going to be there forever, even if it's something no one uses. And it's also tied to the individual that said it. So you also need to kind of like love the fact that they are giving you money and paying you to work on open source. Like it is like a super rare opportunity for people, so you can't just be like a complete like butthole about it and be like, no, we're doing everything the community wants. Like you should compromise and make sure that, you know, as long as everything is transparent and you aren't like doing evil, hopefully it's fine. But you know, making compromises and saying, sure, we want this feature first, but then we will work on this thing that you all have been wanting for a long time. And it gets to be sort of a balance that you will find your way into with a project because it's pretty different for each one. And yeah, collaboration and compromise is key. So that was pretty much all that I had. Oh, crap. I guess we could do questions then. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? One right here on the front row.
Yeah, I've got a question. What is the appropriate amount of ruthlessness to cull unexpected or very large patches that come in sort of from randos that really haven't contributed anything? How do you reject that without like making them feel bad? Because I mean, clearly they spent hours and hours writing this code, right? And now you're just going to say, nope.
Yeah, so that's the key thing with setting up a process, because hopefully the process would say there is a proposal first that you have to do before you do that. And then you can point them to it and be like, I'm so sorry that you spent so much time on this, but the process actually states, and you should have read this beforehand, that you can't do that. And of course they are going to be mad. Like I was literally known at Docker as the ultimate dream killer because I closed all the patches. So, and it's sad because like before we set up processes and stuff, we were being like those people saying, you know what, no, we just don't want this. And people did spend a lot of time on it. So if you are going to close it, I know it feels like you should just put it off and be like, okay, I'm gonna deal with that. I don't wanna deal with that today. But the longer you wait, the more pissed off they're gonna be because they just literally are sitting there like, what the hell is happening? Like if you tell them right away, then it's way better than down the road when you're like, well, 3 months ago you could have told me this. And mostly just because you had anxiety about telling them. But like even that could be annihilated like as a thing entirely if you do set up a process and you say proposals first, because then you just close it with, hey, look at this documentation, sorry that this happened, but please read this the next time or whatever.
Yeah. How about from looking at this from the reverse
Yeah, so a lot of that has to do with governance, which, like I said, I haven't seen done well. You could also like donate your project to a foundation, which I will not openly endorse any of them. I don't know exactly. Like you could. So it really depends on your goals for the project. But if you do give it to a foundation, like you do have more openness because then the company, of course, doesn't have this power over the project, supposedly. But yeah, there are a bunch of companies that set up their own kind of governance guidelines, and I honestly think that's bullshit. Like, sure, like actually, if their governance guidelines say, yes, it is owned by the company, then that's not bullshit, that's nice, it's actually true. But if it says that it's open, then it's like not really the truth. So I think that it really depends on the goal of the project for the company, because it's totally fine for a company to open source a project, keep it under their company GitHub, and have it be a company project. Like that is totally fine. But if you want to claim that your project is entirely open source, then you do need to put some work behind it and actually give up control, which is really hard for companies to do. And I understand how it's hard, but yeah, it's a difficult thing. Yeah.
Any more questions?
How do you get the balance with, you were saying about the help wanted issues about, no, I don't know, maybe it's just me, I get this weird feeling when I'm trying to write them up, like I'm literally writing a bug which I'm not going to fix, and like how do you sit on your hands?
Yeah, that's hard for me as well, because I'm a control freak. And I have like written the issue where I'm like, you edit this file, and then you change this one line right here. I mean, I could do it, but I'm not. I'm just telling you. Yeah, it's super awkward. And I think it's just more like the feeling when someone actually does do it, and you're like, hey, you did what I said. It feels good. So it's like, then you kind of just keep doing it, but it is like the most awkward thing of my entire life, honestly.
There's really no foundations you would recommend?
I mean, that was pretty harsh. I just, they could gain my trust, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, because it's, I've dealt with projects in various foundations, and I have heard things from other people with regard to those. So I do think like some of the newer ones are like really coming into and growing into a really good place, but they are still immature. So it will be interesting to see where those go. But the existing ones, I can't stand behind, I guess. Yes?
Can you cite a few repos or projects that have documented these contracts publicly or well?
Like for governance and stuff?
Yeah.
So I guess like it will be interesting to see where the Kubernetes governance goes. Like I tried to restrain myself on the mailing list to not be so like cynical. But yeah, so that I think that one actually might be really good, depending on how they set it up. But it seems to be really, honestly, heading the right direction. As far as other projects go, I can't like recommend any ones as great. But a lot of projects just don't really set up that kind of stuff, and they don't clearly define it. There are some really bad ones that I'm not going to call out, but yeah, it will be interesting to see like how kind of the CNCF governance things of various projects in it take off. Sure, yeah.
I got one more. Have you seen a project that kind of started out small and kind of ballooned into something really huge that maybe went beyond the first couple of maintainers? Like, can you talk about kind of how things grew, or how you approach the growth of going from kind of a small backwater where you can kind of do whatever you want, that maybe a few people use, and then all of a sudden it's blown up and everyone is like talking about it and using it.
Yeah, so like when I joined Docker, it was semi-big, but of course not the scale that it is today. And yeah, like the day one that I joined the company, I wasn't a maintainer yet of the repo, but I got access to the repo. And that was something that we changed while we were there because someone pushed a master and it was just like a shit show. So yeah, there was that project was a lot where we kind of learned these things as far as how to handle things. And it's hard because you're trying to work on this project that is ballooning and actually contribute code to it, but all these invisible things in the background need to have someone working on them as well, or else it's not going to succeed. So you also need to give credit for these invisible things, like setting up CI, and setting up these processes and documentation around it. So yeah, I guess you just really need a really great key set of contributors that will then allow you to add more maintainers from outside the company. Because once we started growing, then we got a lot more maintainers from outside the company, and we did clearly define processes for even stopping being a maintainer if you wanted to, which is great. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry to keep on the foundations, but I'm curious.
I feel like I opened a wormhole here.
Are there one or two things that you would like them to do so that they could gain your trust? I'm curious what specific.
I think it's more the less they do would help me gain trust. No, I just think the less they do, the better. Really, the projects should define their own things and stay out of it. And then when foundations start to pay people who contribute to the project is where it really gets messy, and that's them interacting with the project too much. Because those people then, if they are, say, bad seeds, you can't get rid of them because they work for the foundation, but they're also contributing to the project. It's just a really large conflict of interest, and that's on one very large project in particular. So yeah, I think that the less they do, the better. But of course, they do need to be there in times of need. But a lot of people would say that they want the foundation to do more, which is really just a weird opinion that I would think that they would have. But yeah, the people that know what's best for the project is the project. So yeah, just give them money. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think Apache is kind of exactly what you said.
Yeah, I mean, Apache is pretty great, actually. I just, Apache is not one of the ones that I have dealt with, actually.
Maybe
Yeah.
one or two more questions, and then let's move on.
Yeah. Yes.
Curious about how you involve non-technical people what value you see in doing that besides just doing the admin work which we have.
Oh, sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
What ways do you involve non-technical people? If you're not a coder at all, how would you recommend that people bring those people in?
Yeah, I think it's about broadening your network, because whenever someone comes up to me at a conference and they're like, I really want to help on documentation, I'm a technical writer, I'm like, oh my God, please, can we just throw money at you? So yeah, it's really networking with more people and then really just giving them a place to show off their awesome work, because a lot of projects don't consider non-technical contributions as contributions, and they so are. They are almost more important than the code. I wish there was less code because then there'd be less bugs. We need more help from other people because they also know what's best. I write terrible docs, and then I love the review from other people who are like, hey, this makes absolutely no sense. So yeah, I think it's really just giving them a place to show off their talents and connecting with them and then getting their communities to come to yours as well.
Anybody else?
Cool.
Thank you, everybody.